So our head office is located on the unceded, traditional and stewarded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. I think it's really important to recognize as an organization that works both within and alongside Indigenous communities, as well as within and alongside newcomer communities in Canada, that we live at this very unique juxtaposition where we are working with folks who are settling actively on this territory that centuries ago and yesterday and today, Canada as an institution continues to be uninvited on. But so often those who are settling here today are coming here seeking refuge and a better life from places where they themselves were Indigenous to their land. And we have a real opportunity to learn from and live by and with the knowledge of the Coast Salish people. Part of that knowledge is a matrilineal society that really centers, values, and celebrates the role of motherhood and of women in their society. Prior to colonization, violence against women and within Indigenous communities was almost unheard of because there was an expansive and nuanced definition of gender, of masculinity, of femininity, and of how all of those roles within us and between us as communities came together to create something that was sustainable and beautiful for not just the individuals in the community, but for the community and the land as a whole. So we really try our best at Mothers Matter Center to have that knowledge and those beliefs and those values ingrained in the work we do. And it's really important for us that we're able to honor that, to share that, and to co-conspire with the Indigenous people whose lands we ourselves occupy to bring back and elevate Indigenous ways of knowing and being. I'd invite you to share a land acknowledgement from where you're joining us from today in the chat, should that feel right for you, and perhaps share some ways in the chat that you are working to be in alignment and partnership with the Indigenous stewards of the areas that you live in. So once again, thank you for joining. I'm really thrilled today that we're here as part of this 10-part series for the Men Like Me program that is being hosted by Mothers Matter Center. This program and initiative is funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada and is designed to empower newcomer, refugee, and immigrant fathers in a few ways. The first way is by dismantling the narrow and restrictive ideas about masculinity that may exist within their communities and within their knowledge, by strengthening family bonds, and by supporting their mental health. The Men Like Me program aims to be a transformative 30-week journey for newcomer fathers, offering free community-based and peer-led support, connection, and learning opportunities to fathers across 2 cohorts in 7 different sites in Canada. And those sites are in Calgary, Edmonton, Yellowknife, Saskatoon, Regina, and Toronto. And I believe we have individuals joining us from each of those regions today. So welcome and good morning from the West Coast. Our goal with Men Like Me is really clear, and it's to equip men with the tools and knowledge they need to be allies in the fight against gender-based violence. As we embark on this session, our focus today will be the critical aspects of working in community and in community-based programming, primarily the recruitment and engagement strategies for men in the gender-based violence work that we're doing as organizations. While much of the discussion around gender-based violence tends to center on addressing the aftermath, tends to center on addressing support for survivors and victims, we believe in starting at the root of violence, which really is the social expectations and norms that allow it to flourish in the first place, and in exploring how, and we also believe in exploring how engaging men and boys and creating these opportunities for connection and positive role modeling can prevent violence before it begins. Our facilitators have encountered challenges in participation retention, And today's session is going to delve into these obstacles and hopefully bring apart some potential solutions. So no pressure to the panelists who are with us today. And speaking of, I am absolutely honored to have three distinguished leaders in the gender-based violence sector joining us today. And they're going to bring their experiences personally and professionally, as well as their insights into the topic that we're addressing today. And so I'd love to welcome them, introduce them very briefly by their name and role, and then I'll leave it up to Amy Zhu, our moderator, to invite them to introduce themselves further. So first we have Jake Sticka, who's the Executive Director of Next Gen Men. We have Dr. Sudeep Minhas, who's the Executive Director of Settlement Assistance and Family Support Services. And we have Jesus Gonzalez from Kawasa Neighborhood House. I mentioned that my colleague Amy will be moderating the panel discussion for today, and I'll leave you in her hands now. But I do want to end on just this one thought, that it is only by coming together, creating connection and community, that we can become co-conspirators with each other and really seek to address gender-based violence at all points of this issue. It's multifaceted, but the bottom line is that gender-based violence requires us to have narrow, restrictive, and outdated versions and visions of what gender is. I want to give a huge congratulations to Amy for leading this project at Mothers Matter Center. Because this is our first foray into gender-based violence prevention from a programming perspective. And we absolutely couldn't do it without her diligent attention to detail, dedication, and really demonstrative role modeling to explore new ways of thinking about gender, about masculinity, and about community-based programming. So with that, Amy, over to you and to our amazing speakers today.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm very honored that we actually do have our three panel speakers, Jake Sticka, Dr. Sudeep Minhas, and Jesus Gonzalez with us, because as Amy mentioned, this is our first foray into the GBV sphere. So we would love to hear about all the expertise and all of the insights they do have to share with us. So I'll begin with a brief introduction from each of our panelists. Jake, would you like to start, followed by Dr. Sudeep Minhas, and then Jesus Gonzalez.
Hi, folks. Honored to be here. I'm actually joining from where I'm indigenous from, which is the Czech Republic. So won't be doing a land acknowledgement, but in the traditional sense. But normally I do call the home of the Coast Salish peoples my home as well. And just wanted to highlight one of the ways that Next Gen Men is really refocusing our reconciliation efforts is basically if there's a paid engagement where we would do a land acknowledgement at the end of the quarter, we kind of round that up and we take a percentage of those proceeds and donate them to an Indigenous organization. And we like to tell the workplaces that we work at that we do that, because if we can do that as a nonprofit, I'm sure that more people could do that as well too. So that's that. But Next Gen Men, we're almost a 10-year-old organization, and we're working towards a future where boys and men feel less pain and cause less harm. Baked into that, we lead with empathy and we follow with accountability. Programmatically, we predominantly focus on masculine identifying youth and male dominant workplaces. But beyond that, we're really champions of change and hope, and try to change the narrative around what it means to be a man through our blogs, our podcasts, our newsletters, and we're actually starting to publish a magazine. Who said that print was dead? I don't believe them. We're doing it. So yeah, I think that's a good start for me. I'm happy to pass the mic.
Thank you, Jake. I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Sudeep Minhas now.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. My name is Sudeep Minhas, as Amy has already mentioned. I'm the Executive Director of Settlement Assistance and Family Support Services. Short form is SAPS, and we've been, and I'm joining from Toronto, by the way. And we've been providing services to our community within this region of Toronto, one side of Toronto, that is Scarborough. Toronto is massive and huge. So we are on the eastern end of the city of Toronto, and it's a multi-service agency, and we provide services to newcomers. We provide services to victims of violence, and we started off as an agency that was actually started by a group, one person who herself was a survivor, and with a couple of others about 35 years ago. So then we grew into different areas. We have supportive counseling, we have housing support, we have settlement services and language classes and mental health, and of course, the whole slew that comes with that. One of the programs that we are actually very, very proud of, we haven't had a few sessions in the past couple of years. I think COVID changed a few things, is Men Make Difference. This is a particular program is about those who are not really, who haven't gone to the criminal level of the violations that they've committed against women and family members or children in their families, or who are, who are in the legal system but not criminally charged, are sent to come to our agency for a 6-week intensive course, which deals with the concepts of the positive masculinity, or what makes you a better human being. And we'll be talking about masculinity, and it's how the toxic masculinity actually has overtaken, especially comes from the Western culture, but has overtaken a lot of other cultures as well in the past few years. And through those sessions, it's just to bring them back to the concept of empathy and recognizing everybody else, their own children, the women in the family, and in fact everyone else, sometimes even seniors, as from an empathetic point of view. So and that is the stance that I will be talking about in detail today as we continue with this webinar. Thank you. I think after me is Jesus.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Jesus Gonzalez. I have been working for 8 years doing prevention work. My program is funded by the Ministry of Children and Family. And I have been, I am a frontline worker. So I have more experience in how to deal with the READ program. At Kiwata, we can support men because we have some other programs like employment, seniors, daycare, family place, youth. So there are many ways that we support them. Right now we have a program, it's a joint adventure with another organization called Mentor. And one of the main things about Mentor, the program is 16 weeks. It's a program for men more than 18 years, and it's a group. And one of the highlights that I started to facilitate this program maybe 4 years ago. And when I learned about the program, I said, oh, I don't think this is a good idea, because they said, you know what, in these groups, you should always have a woman in the group. And I was thinking, I don't think it's a good idea. But then I followed the program, and I started to facilitate the program. And it's amazing the difference that it makes to have a woman in the group. It's just unbelievable, really, because I don't really fully understand what happened, but it's like, I don't know, like equalize things that makes things more serious. And that doesn't mean that the people doesn't go very, very, very deep with their those, ideas and thoughts. We have one session that is about sexuality, and we ask them, do you want my facilitator, a woman, to be with us? Yes. And it was, it's like they disclosed everything. Maybe I can talk a bit more later, but one of the things that shocked me is that the 10 people that we were in the room, the 10 of us, we disclosed that at some point we were sexually abused in some way. And it's men, no? And I was always expecting just girls to be to be assaulted, but not all of us, we have an experience where we feel that they were sexually assaulted in some way. So what can I say? Well, this program is 16 weeks long. One of the nice things is that the people, they want to come back. I mean, we have an intake, a very, very deep intake about each of them. But the intake is done by my co-facilitator, but this woman. And I don't know, she doesn't disclose any of that intake for me. So the idea is that when I approach to the group, I don't have any bias about the group. And then when I said after a session, say, you know what, I think to my co-facilitator, I think that I noticed with this person this and this and that. So he can fill me with that information, yeah, you know, because this person has been doing this and that. And then that system has been working very, very well for me. So I think for me, that's it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your story, Jesus. So I know that all of the three panelists had given a brief introduction of themselves and a bit about their organization. So now I want to ask them, could you please tell us about your organization's programming for men and boys to prevent and end gender-based violence? And if you are a project partner, how does the Men Like Me project sit within your organization's broader work?
Do you want us to go in the same order we did before?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that's
Sure. So we're not a project partner, although I'm one of Amy Robichaud's biggest fans. So Mothers Matter, obviously, big fan as well too. But Next Gen Men started 10 years ago, predominantly working with youth, kind of in that middle school age, that 12 to 14 age, because when we think about violence prevention, it's so much easier to do it way before it's ever happened. And the tough part is when you even take a 12 to 14-year-old boy, they're already somewhat pre-programmed. You know, they've been socialized in a certain way by their parents, by their educators, by their sports coaches. But at that 12 to 14, they're kind of in this tipping point where they are losing the innocence of boyhood and starting to act like what they think it means to be a man. And it's an opportunity to be able to disrupt some of those patterns before they kind of settle in. Not to say that work with other age groups kind of doesn't matter, but we just find that kind of middle school age to be just such a transformative time to be doing this work. So that's really kind of foundational for us. We still do a bunch of work with youth in that way. You know, pandemic or not, the next generation of men is online. And we've been running a Discord server for the past, I guess, 4 or 5 years. And we're really testing the bounds of non-programmatic interventions. So, you know, not necessarily saying, here's the beginning, here's the end, here's the journey, here's how we're going to evaluate it, but really creating a space for them online where they hang out, they come together, and when the opportunities arise for us to have those conversations about, you know, consent or gender or language, taking those opportunities in that non-programmatic way to support them. We've also kind of moved into the space of professional development and capacity building because, you know, whether we like it or not, there's only so many of us doing this work, and how do we scale it as much as possible? And so, you know, there's educators, there's sports coaches, there's youth workers in community. And so we're trying to support them to give them the tools they need to leverage gender transformative programming with the young people that they know and care about. And then we also, on the flip side, work in male-dominant workplaces, construction, mining, oil and gas, those types of places. And a big entry point there into the conversation is men's mental health. And it's great because we can't really talk about men's mental health without talking about gender norms. So it's a sneaky way into that conversation. As well, it's a great entry point because many of them are fathers. And so we're disrupting some generational patterns there in how they're showing up and how they want to show up at home, and really helping navigate the changing waters and the changing culture for them. A lot of men are feeling very unmoored because, you know, they grew up with a sense of masculinity from their fathers, from their grandfathers, and that's rapidly changing in our culture today. So, you know, anything that we can do to stand alongside them as they figure that out. Those are kind of our two main buckets, the masculine identifying youth and the male dominant workplaces. But we partner with a lot of different organizations, and we also lead an initiative called Pathways for Engaging Men and Boys. And we're trying to build a network of organizations and individuals working to engage men and boys so that we're not so disparate, and we're not just learning about someone doing this program over there while someone's doing this program over there, and we can share some learnings and do this hard work not so lonely. So that's Next Gen Men in a nutshell.
Thank you, Jake. Would you like to go next, Jesus?
Yes. Well, I was thinking about Jake, these things about intergenerational. I mean, one way for me to convince men is to talk about intergenerational problems, because, you know, it's interesting, maybe when they have daughters, and they came because many of them, my work is with the Ministry of Children and Family, so that means that they are referred by court, because they were already in a problem at home. The police came, and then the judge imposed some things for them. So when they have daughters and they start to complain about the partner, I said, well, would you like your daughter, when it's an adult, to have a husband like you? And the most people say, no, I don't want to have a husband like me. I said, what kind of husband do you want for your daughter? Well, something that is nice, and have a good communication, that fits him well. I said, well, and why are you doing those things to your wife, not to your partner? And well, that's the way I work, and it's I always try to have exercises or examples that they are very, very clear, very easy to understand for the other ones. I mean, for me, that's one of the main goals, is to create these ideas that they are easy to make the people to think and to start to change, to start to have a different perspective on the world around and on themselves. So that's because I am a frontline worker, a lot of my time I use them to create those kind of ideas and those kind of things that convince them that there is something better. And I said, you know what, if you leave a man with me for 10 minutes, I can convince them to come to the group. I think I am very good doing that, because when you let them know that there is something good for them, that there is something that is going to help the family, that the things that they are going to learn, there are things that they never think about before, and that when you throw an idea, they start to say, oh, I really like that, no? So how can I learn more about that? So that's my role as a frontline worker, to try to encourage them to see things from a different perspective. The Ministry of Children and Family, they don't put a lot of money. I mean, I work 25 hours a week, and I belong to the domestic violence unit. So that's the MCFD, the police, some other organizations. And I am always complaining, because they said, you know what, we got this guy that was aggressive with the partner, and now he's in jail. And that's very good. And when they ask me, what do you think? And I say, well, I mean, if he's doing something very bad, that's okay that he's in jail, but he's going to go out in 2 years. So what's going to happen, no? And I always explain the stats. I mean, you see the stats of women in domestic violence, and men in domestic violence, there is always this red bar, huge. And I said, well, you know what? I think we are putting the money in the wrong place. I'm not complaining that we put a lot of money to help women, one of the victims, but we allocate very little money to the real problem that is domestic violence realized by men. No? And so we always try to fix things. We are fixing things, and as Jake mentioned, but we are not preventing. So for me, we need to do more work about preventing work, because that's where we really need things, no, because we're spending too much money. I mean, the legal side is spending tons of money dealing with these things about domestic violence. And instead of getting that money to there, we can put that money into prevention. It will be, I think, a very more positive outcome. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Yes, prevention work is really, really important. And also, as Jake summed it up, like he's also delving into professional development area. So we've seen like both organizations, they focus on professional development, on encouraging and influencing men to think positive thoughts, and also prevention work. So I want to give it to Dr. Sudeep to tell us about your organization's programming for men and boys, and how does Men Like Me sit with your organization's broader work?
So as during my introduction, I did mention the program Men Make Difference, and it's very similar to Men Like Me. The one major difference is, of course, they come from police and the lawyers, and they're already getting into the legal system. And I think Men Like Me is a step before that, way before these men get into the legal system. There can be prevention, and there should be prevention that is actually, or an intervention that happens before that. I'm also going to give you an example of my previous agency from Windsor, where we had a newcomer youth program. It was art-based. We started with the newcomer youth girls program, but then we also we thought, it just can't be the girls. We have to bring in the boys as well. And it was art-based, and we used to have these sessions for healthy relationships for young boys, young newcomer youth boys, talking about healthy relationships. The reason I'm mentioning that is because I believe, and there is quite a bit of research that that talks about that as well, is that why is it that certain kind of toxic masculinity results in violence, or results in kind of that kind of an oppression and aggression? Is not because unlike how certain cultures also talk about that women might have, and even the Western culture talks about that women might have invited that kind of an attention, rather than victim blaming. Where does it arise? There are certain things that, and this is also important to understand gender and gender roles. There is something that we have not been able to actually discuss and talk about with our young boys and young kids. We have set molds for them to actually fit into, not grow into, but fit into. When you're fitting into a certain kind of a gender role, you are neglecting an aspect of your own self, of your own, in fact, importantly, of your own unconscious. And the ancient cultures and ancient civilizations, as well as a lot of psychology, talks about the, I'm going to use the more popular phrase of yin yang, of masculinity and femininity within your own unconscious. We do not allow, because of these strict gender roles, for us to tap into the masculine aspect within women and the feminine aspect in men. We don't tap into that. We are just only, hyper masculinization and hyper feminization of, and that is how the gender roles actually got stuck. Because that never happens, there is a certain lack that we are fulfilling through that oppression and through aggression and violence. And that lack, what are the ways that we can tap into that lack? As I mentioned, art was one form that we were using. Art is it's very helpful. And the others can be, really having those conversations and allowing young boys and even men to talk about what is it that leads them to this kind of a behavior, rather than being prescriptive and also having so-called sessions of, okay, this is right and this is wrong, or moralizing stuff. Let's make it more human and talk about, well, your ancient cultures allowed these, two genders or the multiplicity of genders within each individual to flourish. And there are things, especially things that we have noticed are constantly getting suppressed and oppressed. Another thing in fact, that aspect I think I can talk about later on with the other questions that you'll be asking about, because Jesus and Jake have already mentioned really what the best approaches or the best answer to this question is. I thought I could bring in another element that we can discuss a little later as we are going ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Sudeep. What better person to talk about traditional gender roles than her, because she was a professor in feminism. So it was great to hear some of your analyses, and we'll definitely get into it in the later questions. For now, I would like to ask, starting in the same order, what does preventing gender-based violence mean to you, and how do you explain it to your clients, given the diverse backgrounds that they come from?
Sorry, I think the same order means me kicking off. I think, Dr. Minas set it up so well around fitting into gender roles versus growing into them. And when I think about that, I think about this phrase from Bell Hooks, and she says, the first act of violence that patriarchy asks of men is not that against women, it's that against themselves. And should they fail to psychologically and emotionally cripple themselves, they'll be met by a group of men that will do it for them. And that violence against the self and cutting off that emotional part of ourself as a man within a patriarchal culture is that fitting into, because if we grew into it, we would explode the man box as it exists, right? Because we're emotional, fully feeling human beings, but we're pushed by the culture to do this. And when we talk about that with our clients and the people we serve, I'm a tall, straight white male. I have a lot of privilege, but I struggled with that myself, and I struggled with my mental health in my late teens and early 20s. At 19, my coping mechanisms were binge drinking and fist fights, and at 22, it was self-harm. And only through kind of counseling and getting support, and also Dr. Minas is a feminist scholar. My partner at the time was a women's studies grad, really looking at what masculinity means, this idea that you got to be tough, you should never show emotion, you should never ask for help. And that was the programming that I absorbed as a young man, and was really harming me. And I think one of the important things, the outcome we're all here for this call is reducing or eliminating gender-based violence, right? And as we see it in our culture today, we see women experiencing it at astronomical rates. 1 in 3 will be sexually assaulted in their lifetimes. We see trans and non-binary individuals experiencing it even higher, but it is 1 in 5 men that experience it. And when we think about the culture of disclosure and vulnerability for men, I would bet that it might be even a little bit higher. And the tough part is, especially on top of that, is the vast majority of perpetrators across the board are men. It's hurt people that hurt people. And so when we talk about gender-based violence prevention, male on male violence is often gender-based violence as well too, because it's happening due to an inadequate performance of masculinity. And then when you are a man experiencing violence at the hands of another man, you then perpetrate lateral violence towards those around you. And so I think the important thing to keep in mind is we're inviting people into these conversations. It's never about that other person over there. Not never. It's obviously a piece of it. But when you're being invited, there has to be something in it for you. What is it when you grew up that you're wanting to unpack? What is it in your relationship with your partner that you're struggling with? How do you want to show up for your children? How do you want to be seen in your community? And I think when we are able to invite people through that kind of lens of what's in it for me, we have a lot more success than, hey, you're bad, you did something wrong, you should come to this, right? So I think that's just a shift in how we engage men and boys.
Thanks, Jake. And yeah, that saying is so right. Hurt people hurt people. And I think that's why all of us do the work that we're doing right now. Like, we really want to instill these healthier perceptions of masculinity, of what it means to have a healthy relationship with men so that the hurt doesn't transfer or the hurt is reduced. So thanks. I will ask Jesus now.
Thank you. I think that we men, we have a very bad reputation for many different things, I think so. But I think one of my goals is to try to change that narrative. Right now, I am working on a PowerPoint, and in that PowerPoint, I talk about men that somebody says they talk about perpetrators, offender, individuals. Sometimes they refer to men like that, and I said, you know what? But all of them, they were babies. All of them, they were babies. They were perfect babies. They were ready to get to thrive, to be happy, to be intelligent, to be self-motor. I mean, they were perfect babies. And then I put a picture of somebody that is very angry. So I said, so what happened from here to here? I mean, this happy baby that had all the options in their life, and now it's an angry man that maybe is violent and is getting in trouble. So we need to talk about what's happening in between these 2 points. And for me, it's very important to see how when we have a baby, we are fulfilling their needs. I mean, it's crying, we see what's happened to the baby, maybe meal, maybe this. Half an hour later, it's crying again. So you're fulfilling the needs all the time. They don't talk to you, so they are fulfilling the needs. But at some point in life, we stop seeing needs and we start to see behavior. So now don't jump in there, don't talk to this, don't do that. And then we lose the chance to fulfill those needs. So now we want to control behavior. And for me, that's the beginning of how we start, men and women as well, but men, we are more affected because we can't express many things. And we cannot, and if we express some things, maybe we can lose the contact with my father or my mother, my caregiver. So sometimes I need to repress many things because I cannot say things I want to be, I depend on them. So when I explain this to men, for them it starts to be very eye-opener, no? Because then you realize that you were not always like that you become at some point like that, and what makes you become like that. I mean, we have a society that is very homophobic and it's oriented in that way that you need to succeed, you need to express your feelings, this man bob all the time, no? And that's how you became this angry man. It's not, I mean, all of us, as I said, we were babies with all the options, but something makes us to be what we are. And for me, it's very important that the community understand this, because at the end of the day, who is the victim? I mean, women are the victims, of course, but men as well, we are victims of education and society that is not allowing us to express our feelings. So who needs help? Both of us need help. Women need support, men, we need support as well, no? And I think that's an important point, because when we talk about patriarchy, I think, well, for me, even patriarchy has always this negative spin. But patriarchy is not good or bad. I mean, patriarchy is just a way to say men, a group of men, they are driving this community or this group of people. Because when I asked about patriarchy, they say, no, it's when men is being aggressive and violent and this, and then I said, so what's matriarchy? No? So matriarchy is just a way to say that a group of women, they are ruling a community. Men is a group of men ruling the community. What kind of rules are they going to use? That's the problem. No, because we can have a good patriarchy and a bad patriarchy. And right now we are using a patriarchy that is really making men suffering, men and families and the communities, no? Because there are a number of rules that they are imposed on us, and we just follow. We never ask what's happening in there. That's why when our kids are young, we start to use behavior to control behavior, because we want to submit to those rules. There are a number of rules that they are already here, and we want to follow those rules even when we don't ask if it's good or bad. So, well, just to finish, part of the idea of my program is to change the perspective that society has about men. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so preventing GBV for you really seems like just supporting men, breaking down the traditional barriers of how they're perceived as, and having a safe space for them to discuss with other men their feelings, so that from when they were a baby to adulthood, you can really unpack what happened in between. Yeah.
I just want to say that, I mean, I want to support parents as well, because the parents are the ones that have the ideas and values and beliefs that we put on our children. So we need to work on parents as well and caregivers.
Yes, for sure. Supporting parents. Thank you. And I'll go to Dr. Sudeep Minhas.
Yeah. Again, thank you both, Jesus and Jake. You've really covered all the bases. And as Jesus was mentioning about patriarchy, and also changing the narrative, I think one thing we have to remember is that men are also victims of patriarchy. They benefit, definitely, but there is also a lot of harm that is done to men. And that harm, and this is where I think also modifying and changing these narratives is important, because that harm is the pain men suffer. And the expression of pain is where it becomes even more problematic. So it's a pain that is repressed. It's a pain that cannot be expressed. And it's a pain that emanates from performance, because gender is always performative. All gender roles are performance. They are never fully the true representation of every self. When that performance is seen as your sole identity, that's where the disconnect and the pain actually exacerbates. And a lot of times, violence is a result of extreme helplessness. And there is a violence that is, of course, there is an organized violence, but there is also a violence that is a result of anger. And anger is always a result of where the other, because it's almost, I'm going to use the analogy of pressure releases. How is pressure built up? Pressure is built up because when all the other channels are blocked constantly. So any outlet, an outlet of expression of pain, an outlet of expression of sadness, an outlet of expression of just connecting and emotions, when all of those are constantly plugged, it is going to burst, and it's going to burst in ugly ways. If we can have that narrative, especially in our programming where we are discussing these issues with men, we cannot come to them and say, okay, you can't be violent, you can't treat women like this, you can't act like this. The moment you are going to be prescriptive and things are going to be about no and can't, the initial reaction is going to be self-defense, or defense mechanism is going to come in, and we are going to be completely shut out. So how do we bring them in? We have to bring them in through having these conversations around where is the trap? Where does it hurt? Where is the pain? Let's discuss that. And actually, even to get to that, you will have to build a lot of trust. So I'm not going to rehash everything that Jake and Jesus said, because that is the crux from where we have to kind of build these programmings from.
Thank you, Dr. Sudeep. Yeah, you are so right about how anger really works. Like it builds up and it just bursts. So it's really important to talk to people to find help when it does, so that it doesn't come to that stage, or so that that stage is delayed for more. So I want to ask everyone, what are the critical challenges of recruiting and retaining men and boys in GBV prevention programming? And how do you navigate these challenges?
I mean, I think one of the major challenges is that when we're thinking of these programs in the space that we operate within the funding structures that we have, Jesus, I empathize with what you were saying about the lack of resources and whatnot, right? Is it's all deficit based. And who on this call, if I said, hey, you suck, here's a program, you should come and it'll make you better, would you sign up for that? Doesn't sound very motivating, right? Like, I think it needs to really be, and you compare it with programming for women and girls about the aspirations and the ambition and the hope that is centered there. And we don't have enough narratives right now in our culture and our society, because when we frame boys and men's empowerment, we're worried of, upholding and uplifting the patriarchy, which absolutely exists. But it's how do we support them to walk within that in ways that don't harm themselves and don't harm others? And I think that's a worthwhile pursuit to support. And so I think a lot of it really comes down to framing the conversation in a way that they would want to take part in. And I think, resources are definitely a challenge. I think, intersectionality is really important in this as well too. A lot of, quote unquote men's work that is happening out there is within, Western heteronormative kind of cultures. How do we get that into newcomer communities, Indigenous communities, more queer spaces, and those types of things? And really, I think it's a pluralization of masculinities that I think is really important, because when there's a singular masculinity, we get back into that fitting in. But when we normalize multiple masculinities, and that, Jesus's and mine, and, whatever masculinity you acknowledge within yourselves as well too, is different and equal and valid, that's really when we're in that space of plurality and being able to see and empathize with others. So I think those are some of the challenges in what and how we approach this. And the tough part is that even if you want to shift the narrative to be more positive, aspirational, those types of things, a lot of the funding mechanisms and the data are far behind in, meeting with that. So you're kind of stuck saying these narratives to funders and programmatic bodies and those types of things. So I think really we need a cultural shift around this more broadly.
And what challenges are you facing, Jesus, with recruiting and retaining men and boys?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I started to do this work maybe 25, 28 years ago. And the first meeting that we have was exactly about this: how we retain and how we bring men to these groups. No, it's very challenging. I think one answer is food and entertainment, really, because I think, there is a group that is, I don't remember, they were close to Vancouver, and they have like a barbecues, or they have movies, presentations. So you invite them to these things, they come, and then you explain about your programs, and you say, well, this program is about this and that, and there is this convenience maybe for you. You have family, you have problems with your partner. So when they see you face to face, and you start to build up trust in those conversations, I think that's the best way to bring men to the groups. Men, we live in fear, and we live in fear that we are not right. So when you invite you to a group, you say, I am okay. Why do I need to go to that group? So that's why we need to break that barrier in some way. And I think that food entertainment is a very good option, to start to go a different way to try to bring them to the group. Retaining for me is not a problem at all. I mean, once you create a space that is safe and is bringing them things that they are convenient for them, they attach to the group. I mean, I started a group like a year and a half ago, and I said my group is 16 weeks, and everybody was complaining, no, 16 weeks is too much, whatever. And then after 16 weeks, they said, we want more. So after of those 10, they still come into the second group. And now I'm going to start another group tomorrow. And out of those 10, even 5, they are going to come back for the third time, 16 weeks. No? And that's because there is something that's good for them. It's something convenient that is helping them. It's a safe space. Definitely, that's a completely safe space. So when you are able to provide those things to them, they attach to the group. I mean, for me, I don't have any problem retaining. My problem is still bringing them to the groups. No, and you have your network. So I send emails to everybody. I have a poster, but it seems that doesn't work very well for some reason. No, and I think now we need to join people like you to use media as well to start to try to bring more participants to the program. So that's important as well, to bring young people, to bring young fathers to the groups. It's important. I think the way to do that maybe is the media. The media is a way to start to convince them to participate in these groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. And Dr. Sudeep, would you like to share?
I do have our facilitators join this session, and I think that in question and answer, they will actually be able to provide very, very tangible examples and issues, which I don't think they have an issue getting in clients. I do want to talk about, in general terms, about something that Jake had mentioned, and that is about, bringing them in and talking about prescriptive things. They're not going to come in when you're going to say, okay, something is broken with you, we are going to fix you. Unless you are Jordan Peterson and you release this book called 7 Rules of Life or something like that, where yes, I mean, yes, young men are broken, and 12 rules. Thank you very much. 12 rules of life. I don't know why. Yeah, because he's a Jungian psychologist. 12 doesn't make sense when it comes to Jung. So anyways, I always knew that he was a fake Jungian. 12 rules of life means that there are certain things that are broken in young men, and young men flocked to him because he was espousing a kind of toxic masculinity that he didn't have to put in an effort, because the whole culture, the popular culture, the political narrative, the narratives in media, the narratives in print or in the movies was already celebrating that toxic masculinity. And he was trying to sell an idea of that you can be a better, or your toxicity can actually be raised higher if you follow these 12 rules. Now, for us, it's actually going to be breaking that toxic masculinity. Nobody is going to come in when you tell them that, okay, what you are following right now is unacceptable, and now we are going to change you because we have probably 12 or 14 prescriptions that are going to make you better. I think the approach to that would be not talk about what is wrong with them or what this program is going to be, doing, or rather what this program is going to be prescribing. The thing can be that this is a space to actually have fun, to have activities. What those activities are going to lead to, you don't need to talk about that, because when things are, and another way where people actually begin to learn a lot easier, or actually accept new ideas a lot easier, is when they are made to believe that those ideas actually came from them. So if this is the space where your kids and you are going to come and enjoy certain activities, so you can leave the women back home, they can cook, or they can clean the house while you're away. This is what we are going to do. And within those activities, certain things come up where they begin to accept, yes, okay, if they approach something like this, it makes life easier. It makes their pain less. They don't have to perform. They can be their real self, as well as the kids can be the real self. So, as I said, the actual examples really, Augustine or Hussein, they can talk about. They are the facilitators. They are on this. But this is what I would believe is an approach that could work better.
Thank you, Dr. Sudeep. So we've heard from Jake, Jesus, and Dr. Sudeep about all of the challenges that they face in recruiting and retaining men and boys in GBV, especially like as Jesus and Jake had both mentioned, sustainable funding models for programming, and also trying to promote positive masculinity in a light to encourage more men and boys to join this programming. So for the Men Like Me program, for our facilitators, we found that one of the main challenges for engaging men and boys was actually that a lot of them had full-time jobs. And the fact that they had these full-time jobs made it very challenging for them to consistently attend the group meetings and for them to remain engaged and complete the activities and also model some of the behaviors and activities within the allyship guides that we have. So I'm wondering, like, how do you navigate men with full-time jobs and engage them in your programs?
I don't want to come off as too flippant, but I think definitely sometimes we have to call bullshit when it's bullshit. Like women also have full-time jobs, and yet they make time and space and effort to go above and beyond. And so I wouldn't just say it outright that way to a person. I would find a joking way to kind of get to that point. But I think the struggle there is actually the masculinity programming in a way already, because when I hear, oh, I have a full-time job, I can't participate in this, that means that my singular role is to be a provider, right? And so when I think a lot of what we try to do is kind of jujitsu in a way and try to flip it, right? And so this masculine narrative that I have to be a protector and a provider, what do those two words mean? They mean safety in terms of resources and physical and shelter and those types of things. And so how do we take this opportunity that we're inviting them to take part in as a furtherance of their role as a provider and a protector, right? It's not instead of, it's a part of it, right? It's adding to your ability to do that for your loved ones, for the people that you care about. And so I think I wouldn't let them off the hook so easy, and I would try to reframe it in a way that it kind of aligns with that masculine, narrow-minded thinking, right? Because we hear that in our male-dominant workplaces all the time. These guys, they're up at oil and gas camps, week on, week off. And they say, oh, I don't have time to feel my emotions, to feel my pain, because I got to be out here grinding, making money, bringing that home. But then, we got to ask them about what's the quality of your relationships when you are home. Do you feel like you're connecting with your children or those types of things, right? So how do we show them that this is a way to do that other aspect of it, not just the money piece?
Thanks, Jake. That's really awesome advice. So asking them how the program has benefited them, for them to realize that it is really making a positive impact in their lives. So that is a great way to engage men. Yeah. I think our facilitators in the meeting right now can learn from this too. And Dr. Sudeep, would you like to go after?
Yeah, I was thinking actually, exactly to what Jake is talking about as raising the quality of, asking the question of what is the quality of your relationship. There are also certain media images that can be used to, draw them in. And one of the best media image that I've actually seen is fathers playing ball with their kids. And if this is an activity that actually almost, is seen as a replica of that, or if this is an activity where you are going to be playing with your kids, and we are giving you a space to actually not just play with the kids, but also to probably find even better, tools or games to play with your kids. For newcomer families, and especially for South Asian families, this can also be a space where you can come and play cricket, which you can't find probably at other places. So it could be a cricket game, or it could be any other game that maybe our Middle Eastern families might find they can't have access to. So it is also bringing them in with a connection to their own roots. So there is another emotional connection that a lot of newcomer families would jump at. I was also thinking actually that sometimes it helps when your facilitators have very strong roots within their own communities, that they attend the barbecues, they attend certain other community events, and they know a lot of young fathers. That helps way better than just as a flyer or a poster, or asking somebody to send their husbands or somebody else to attend this session. Rather than it being this removed activity, it becomes more personal. Number 3, which I think is very important, and this is also important when it comes to how we write our proposals, is let us start putting within our proposals a certain kind of an honorarium. If we are inviting clients to participate in events, a small honorarium always helps. It's not just something, it's a good hook, but it also tells them that we value their time. So
Thank you, Dr. Sudeep. Yeah, I have heard from my facilitator that it really makes a difference when they're engaging in other activities outside of the program for participant retainment. Like one of the groups is hosting a picnic soon, so they're inviting all the families, all the wives are coming to, all the children. So I'm really excited to hear from him how it goes. And also, yeah, I definitely agree with the honorariums. Like because of the nature of funding models, sometimes we don't get the ability to provide honorariums, but it is really important to compensate people for their time, especially if you are in a small center or rural area. It's very hard to get around, even with transportation reimbursement. So just honoring people for their time is really important. Thanks. And Jesus, would you like to share how you engage men who have full-time jobs in particular?
Yes, I was thinking that every week when I have my group, I have $25 for food, and I need to do something with that, no? But when related to food, one thing that is interesting is that whatever food I can bring, I organize in a beautiful manner. I mean, if it's ham, I roll it and put it organized, and the coffee, and they really appreciate those kind of things. No, because I can see that they feel that they belong to that, and somebody's caring about them. Maybe something that we didn't have before, or maybe they had before that, and they recognize that somebody is caring about them, and that helps. So yeah, I mean, after hours, it's a way of working with them. I mean, now with technology, you can use Zoom as well, one-on-one. It's not the same, of course, but it helps. And it helps mainly when the participant is not in the same city that you are. You can keep giving some support. Outreach, sometimes I do outreach. I don't do a lot because sometimes it's not easy or even dangerous. I mean, right now I don't go to nobody's home, no, because it's a lot of risk. But sometimes we meet in coffees or parks, depends on the weather. And even coffee shops are not very good because there are always people and there are noise. So there are options to go around to meet with them and start to have a conversation with them. But yeah, the best is to have a space that you can fix, that you can arrange, that everybody feels safe, that is quiet, preferably. So yeah, that's the way I try to work things around. No, one thing that I think is important as well is to do follows up. I mean, for many it's very important because we forgot about things. So it's important to say, oh, remember that in 2 days we have our meeting, or tomorrow we have our meeting. So those reminders really help, because sometimes it's not that they don't want to come, sometimes they are in different work, and those reminders, they work very well. And the follow-up after the sessions are done, sometimes it's good to send a text message, say, I hope everybody's okay. Remember that if you need any support, we are here to help and talk to you. So those things are very helpful, because they still feel that they have a support even when they are not coming to the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Yeah, so definitely giving words of encouragement and showing the participants that you care about them helps, and also setting reminders so that they come to your meetings. And I know in our line of work, we tend to use heavy words that become jargon. So I want to ask everyone, what does positive masculinity mean to you? And how do you explain what positive masculinity is to your clients? And we'll start with Jake.
I saw this question and I was really stuck, because I wish we just stopped coding things as masculine and feminine. These are all human traits that we all have, but it is what it is, and we kind of have to deal with it. There's a quote that sits in my office above my desk, and it's a Marcus Aurelius quote, and it says, "Don't waste time arguing what it is to be a good man, be one." And I think when I think of positive masculinity, we all know what it is, right? It's that person it's that guy friend that you're grateful for. It's that male colleague or boss that like looks out for you. It's the person who, holds the door. It doesn't even have to be a man. Like we know when we see it and when we feel it, what positivity in our communities and in our cultures is. And we sometimes have these conversations about positive masculinity as it's like this great mythical thing that we have to find, but it exists. And one of our we have this deck of cards that we created. They're 42 affirmations, and it's called Boys Will Be Blank. And the reason it says boys will be blank is because the traditional narrative is boys will be boys. But when we fill in the blank for them with boys, we rob them of filling it with all the positive things that exist within them. Curious, empathetic, courageous, strong, loving, caring, affectionate, right? Like all those things these young people have within them. And so, boys and men will be what we give them the space and the encouragement to be. And that's really what I think, positive masculinity is, because as soon as we say toxic masculinity or this negative thing, and then there's this positive thing, we're just creating a new box for people to be in. So I would rather we just kind of, break it down, which I'm sure doesn't help answer the question.
No, it's a great analysis. Positive masculinity is just being a good person, and it shouldn't be gendered. So I'm curious, like if it's not gendered, like what would you want in replacement to positive masculinity? Like what would you name it as?
Good vibes. I don't know.
True, good vibes.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, like I don't want to diminish it, because it's an important and aspirational goal that we're working towards, right? But the front end of the question was framed in how in our sector, in our work, we use this language, and it's very academic, it's very activist, and that just doesn't connect with the vast majority of people. And so I think it serves us well as the people who want to lead the transformation and the change to drop it as much as we can. And it maybe it's a joke to some, but good vibes, or I don't know, it's just being a positive person that people want to be around, that supports other people, that is ambitious and is striving, but not at the expense of others.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Dr. Sudeep, what does positive masculinity mean to you, and how do you explain it to your clients?
Fortunately for my clients, I don't have conversations with them because I probably would be driven out because I um, get into too much of theory. So one of the things actually that has bothered me for a very, very long time is that and I can understand the kind of the restrictions that were imposed on a lot of us in to how to respond to toxic masculinity. One, we have to remember there is masculinity and there is femininity. Once you take the toxicity out, there is masculinity that, as Jake has said, is just being a positive person. So there is, it becomes kind of in my head an oxymoron to call positive masculinity. It was just a kind of a way to combat that toxicity. We have to understand what is that toxicity that we are talking about that needs to be taken out of the equation. And once that toxicity is taken out, of course, you're left with everything that is good and positive in it. However, there is no one single definition because there is no one single individual that we are going to look up to and say, well, this is what, positive masculinity looks like. Everyone is going to figure out a way to express themselves as full individual, as a human being, not as these boxes that we have been put into, and feel the freedom of being able to express who you are. So the moment as an individual, as somebody who's tapped into their full potential and you've become that free individual or a free person, that is positive femininity and positive masculinity, because you have to remember that even women are then trapped into what is this femininity. I'm going to give you one example of where the toxicity is, and I think we need to talk about that even with the men in these within these groups. The toxicity is that in certain Eastern cultures, women are supposed to act in a certain way where men cannot enter the kitchen, they cannot clean the dishes, they cannot cook, they cannot even take the clothes out of their closet. So all of that has to be done by the woman. And then men have to act in a certain way. They have to go out, they have to be the provider, they have to be also to be, physically strong, to be able to be the physical protectors. If we are actually talking about that kind of the positive masculinity with men, we also have to talk about how women then also need to be free. One day I don't want to cook and can't be having those conversations with the men in their family and say, well, you can't cook, or you are diminishing my role. Because what has happened is that the importance for us as individuals, or sorry, as human beings, is we derive it from the roles that we perform. There is no other happiness or fulfillment that we feel outside of those roles. So only if I'm able to cook for my husband or take care of my kids, am I a good wife or a good mother? So once you start breaking down the roles and talk about the full expression and the freedom of that expression, that takes care of whatever positive masculinity would be. For me, it is just the full expression of an individual.
Thank you, Dr. Sudeep. Yeah, so being oneself and not having any gender roles confine them, and they can do whatever they want. Jesus, would you like to share?
Yeah, I was thinking, well, I want to think that we have a moral compass. When I work with men, I said, you know what? We always know when we are doing something that is not okay. There is a part of us that always know that something is okay, it's not okay. But in our society, we have many things that support the other way. To say, okay, no, that's okay because you are the man of the house, you have the right, this is your wife, needs to obey you. So, but we know that there is something inside that is telling us that something is not working okay. I think for me, positive masculinity is respect to yourself and the people and land around you. That's for me positive masculinity. A couple of days ago, we have one indigenous man that came to give the blessing about some furniture that we got from another indigenous person. So at the end, he said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "You know what? I want to know your perspective, or you have any things that you can say that as settlers, what we can do in order to have a better relation, a better communication with indigenous people." And he said, "You know what? I think you need to know yourself. You need to be honest with yourself, and you need to share your story in an honest and open way." And for me, that's a very important, for me, it was very interesting to say that, because yes, I think we need to be honest with ourselves, be positive with ourselves, to share our stories without any fear, because that's going to make us to be ourselves. And I think if we are able to be ourselves, then we can respect the people around us, and we can encourage other people to do the same. So for me, this part about positive masculinity is about myself. How can I improve myself? How can I see my own story and understand my story? And we need to talk about trauma, and we need to talk about what's happened to us when those things happen to me, and what I am doing now. And maybe there are things that they are difficult to solve for myself, but if I at least I know that I have that problem, I can try always to do something to fix that, no? So yes, positive masculinity is about take care of ourselves to start. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Yeah, your definition is very universal, just taking care of oneself. And we've heard from Jake that positive masculinity is really good vibes. Heard from Dr. Sudeep that positive masculinity is thinking about what oneself wants to do. And we've heard from Jesus that it's thinking about yourself, what you want, and also navigating like what it means to be a good person. So looking into the moral compass. And because morality is subjective, and also because individualism can be controversial, because there's societies who believe in individualism, some societies who believe in collectivism. It all relates to how there's different cultures, right? There's different cultures, perspectives, and thoughts in Canada, because we have such a vast multicultural landscape. So when working with men of different cultures and perspectives, how do you discuss and agree on what positive masculinity should look like? For example, if you think X is right, but they don't think it's right, like how would you navigate that? And I'll start off with Jake.
I feel like I've been leading them all off. I'd love to pass it to Dr. Minas.
All right, I'll take it up. Thank you, Jake. Yes, I do agree that you were taking on the burden of, doing the full explanation right at the beginning. One, we have to remember, there is no one culture that is right and there is no other culture that is wrong. We can't give examples from one culture. And I absolutely would not use the phrase that now that you are in Canada, you can't do this. We have to remember that, GBV is as prevalent with white Canadians as it is with, all the other cultures. However, I am going to talk about this whole concept of masculinity, how it permeated other cultures. And as one of my previous board chairs would say, yeah, it's all, for Sudeep, it's the fault of two things, capitalism and colonialism. So I'm going to fall back on colonialism this time. It was a very Western concept of nationalism or nationhood that was talking about masculinity that was then imported into a lot of African and Asian countries wherever the Western imperialism and colonialism happened. Because most of the ancient cultures in Africa as well as in Asia, quite a few of them were matrilineal societies. And the others, I mean, even if they weren't matrilinear, they actually were celebrating the expression of both femininity as well as masculinity within one individual. Folk tales, ancient drawings on the walls, ancient literature, they all talk about there's this expression of both of both masculinity as well as femininity, as well as the fluid gender roles. Then as as the nationalism and as the whole concept of the father nation started growing in the late, it is really from the late 17th century onwards that then it spread into different countries and different regions of the world. That and for that matter, also to talk about how the different sexual orientations were acceptable within the ancient cultures, and then with the spread of colonialism, how it became criminalized in cultures that originally did not have it criminalized. And then a lot of these countries had what were called the resistance against their colonial masters. During the resistance, they actually then chose to have men and women both become, the equal partners in resistance. But the project of 2 or 3 centuries of, the Western concept of nationhood and the Western concept of patriarchy was so strong that a lot of the Eastern cultures continued using that Western patriarchal structure within how they formed their constitutions, how the laws were written, and how the societies were being run. It became highly patriarchal in that system. And how do we approach that is actually when we talk to different cultures, we are not going to talk about how Canada is a haven for, for women's freedom or for, where women can be as free as they want to be, just because, yes, there are laws and there are systems that make it easier for women to kind of participate especially in the economic well-being of or the economic development of the nation. However, women are still being relegated to certain gender roles within Canada. And we are not going to use that example. I think the best approach is to, what I say is to use that emotional power of talking about your own culture, how it used to be, how it treated women, how it actually also allowed men to be able to express themselves the way they want to, rather than giving these examples. And that helps, I think, in breaking down those barriers of communication. I hope I didn't go all over the place to come to this one single notion that we can use their own culture, their own religion, their own sets of beliefs and as Jesus said, we all have that, that internal, I kind of don't want to use morality because morality is also defined by dominant discourses, that whole concept of empathy that we have as human beings.
So you would say, to break down barriers of what positive masculinity looks like for different cultures, it's just to focus on having empathy and also recognizing the background of colonialism that played a major impact on how masculinity looks in different cultures.
Yeah, and decolonizing the construct and decolonizing the narratives.
Great, thanks so much. And I'll go to Jesus next.
I want to say, it's my turn. Okay. I was about to say that I agree with Amy and Sudip about I want to remove moral compass. I want to say just compass. I think it's a good idea because we have a compass that is let us know what's happening in how are we behaving. I'm going to check out the moral world. I am kind of lost now. So can you remind me, please?
Yeah, for sure. So the question was, how do you break down barriers between men of different cultures and perspectives to discuss
Okay.
and agree on what positive masculinities can look like? Because there's so many different cultures that might disagree on what is healthy masculinity and what is positive versus toxic.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, for myself, I want to think that everybody is free to think and do things that they want. But there is a boundary. There is a boundary. And that boundary for me is when you start to hurt yourself or other people. So besides that, you can think whatever you need and do things that whatever you need, if they are not harming yourself or other people. That's the main thing for me as a way to start to talk with other communities and other immigrants. I think the language is very important as well. We need to be very careful when we express things. Sometimes you don't know what's happening on the other side. One time I have a group of, there are 4 men, they didn't know each other. It was a parenting group. And they were from the Middle East, from different places. And I asked it, so can you tell me a story about your childhood? Was the completely wrong question. For the next hour, it was about murder and bombs and explosions and killings, because that was their childhood. And I was not ready for that. I was not ready to see where these people come from, what do I need to do, what could be the background. Like 3 days ago, somebody called me and said, you know what, I'm going to divorce from my partner. And I say, oh, sorry, I'm really sorry. No, that's good because we're not going to fight anymore. So I was saying things that I shouldn't. And I think when we talk to people from other communities or other immigrants, we need to be very careful about those kind of things. How are we going to ask our questions? What kind of things are going to say? Because we can make mistakes very easily. As we mentioned before, you need to know more about their own religion, their own values and beliefs. Because maybe at some point you want to challenge them, but you're not going to challenge them in a way that is going to do something negative, no? Because our work is to bring something positive out of the narrative that we have with them, no? So I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Jesus. And Jake, you're up.
Dr. Minison introduced the word empathy, and the word that I heard from Jesus was humility. I think we definitely need humility. And, I've spoken, virtually at conferences in Singapore and in Africa and those types of things. And I feel that sometimes I'm invited as the person from Canada because Canada has it all figured out. And I always say to them, we have the same problems, they just look different here. And so I think we need to be humble and Canada is definitely no bastion. I remember my parents and I immigrated to Canada in the early 90s, and we immigrated to Winnipeg, and the settlement agency, there's a large urban Indigenous population in Winnipeg, and they said, welcome to Canada, watch out for those people. Immediately we had anti-Indigenous sentiment as we arrived in Canada, right? And so, this place that we call home and that, we think is, or we know is a bastion for people around the world, we definitely have a lot of our own work to do. So I think humility is important. And then the last word that I would offer is curiosity. I think when we come from a place without judgment and with curiosity of, how did this show up for you? What was it like with your father, with your mother, with your grandparents? What does it look like in government? And really get them thinking about how these narratives of masculinity, femininity, women's roles, men's roles, patriarchy, whatever it is, exist and permeate within their cultures and how they look different here, and what they miss from back home and may be good there, and that we could benefit from here, or what is problematic here and maybe is different there. I think curiosity can build a lot of bridges. And then to Jesus's earlier point, when there comes a point to have a little bit of challenge, a little bit of discomfort, when you have a foundation of curiosity and empathy, I've seen you, I've heard you, I care for you, that moment of challenge is far easier to do because the person knows that you care about them and that you're connected with them.
Thank you. Yeah, empathy and humility, showing that you care about the person that you're engaging with, and reminding yourself to be respectful of others' cultures and coming from a non-judgmental background. So, because there's many newcomer, refugee, and immigrant men in Canada, the perceptions of gender roles can differ vastly compared to their country of origin. So, can you share with us an example of how you apply culturally appropriate tools to help engage men and boys towards a healthy perception of gender roles? So, what culturally appropriate tools do you apply? I will start with Dr. Sudeep.
I mentioned earlier, we are actually just starting out right now. We joined the whole project very late. But one of the things that I can talk about is it kind of, I think that there are issues that I kind of struggle with when it comes to what is culturally sensitive, and terminology. Sometimes we use these terms, and I'm still kind of struggling to actually understand how to unpack it. So I'm going to actually give a much simpler answer, and that would be to start, first of all, actually asking the questions of all our participants. What are the gender, I mean, just putting the gender roles and asking, okay, according to you, what role should this gender perform and what role should this gender perform? In asking those questions about, okay, let's have a male gender and a female gender, and let's kind of have a conversation around what are these gender roles. And then to breaking the, to actually subvert the stereotype, what would happen if this particular role that you think that this gender should perform was being performed by this one? Have conversations around it, just healthy, in a very, very safe space. Some of those things are going to be actually reacted to with humor, because humor, again, is another self-defense mechanism that we utilize when we don't understand the impact, or we are uncomfortable with the impact. So then we're going to ask, you could actually ask those questions. What is humorous about it? Why do you think men performing this role or women performing this role is something to laugh at? Because we have seen, again, in society, one of the oppressions, and of course, even at workplaces that we've seen, when men or women are asked to do certain, jobs, and then the others are just going to snicker or laugh at it. There is derision in that laughter. We need to start kind of asking sometimes uncomfortable questions. Why do you think that we are laughing at it? And that, I think, is how we can start that conversation. Because again, approaching it from a culturally sensitive perspective, because sometimes not everybody is going to be, even in one single culture, it's going to be very difficult because it's not a monolith. There are so many different things that happen within one single culture. It's going to be very difficult to pinpoint it, because I think then we might also fall in the trap of stereotyping cultures, which might just be a little bit more insensitive than what we were trying to achieve. So that is my take.
Thank you, Dr. Sudeep. Yes, so creating a safe space first and unpacking all of the traditional gender roles that they might or might not have, and then sort of questioning some of the humor that goes on in the room. Jesus.
Amy, I just wanted to build off of that, and maybe play with the word that you said. You said safe space. And I think safe space is when we are striving to be culturally sensitive, we are striving towards safe spaces. But Dr. Minez pointed out the impossibility of that because we don't know how to be sensitive to everyone all the time. And so what I think is better to strive for in this work actually is the brave space. And the brave space is where we can challenge and be challenged, right? And not face threat or expulsion or ostracization or whatever because of that. And I think when you have this multicultural opportunity, that is the best space to do it because you can approach a lot of it with curiosity. And I think another good exercise that I sometimes try is John Rawls had the theory of justice, but within that he had the veil of ignorance. And the veil of ignorance was taking a step back, and we're co-creating a new society, and we don't know who we are. We don't know if we're going to be men, women, white, person of color, an immigrant, or an indigenous person. We don't know any of those things. What would that society look like? How would we structure it? And we can have these types of conversations. And naturally, through those debates, I think we start to adjust for the people who would be most marginalized because we don't know that we may end up in that. And then if someone in that conversation, that debate argues for more privilege, we can ask them, well, what would happen if you didn't become that individual, right? And it's an interesting, it's more of a heuristic thought exercise, but I would just say, that culturally sensitive term is tied to that safe space term, and we cannot promise that because everyone's sense of safety and sensitivity is different than another person's. And so how do we name that we're going to be having, difficult, challenging conversations? And that's okay. And we're going to move through them together, and you belong here just as much as if you didn't say that thing. The last thing I'll offer is a practice that we use at Next Gen Men to do that. We give people permission to speak in draft. And when we say speak in draft, I think a lot of people are really worried about saying the wrong thing because it feels final. And we say you can say the wrong thing, and then we might edit it together, right? And get to that outcome. And that's taken off like wildfire in our work. So hopefully that's useful.
Thanks so much, Jake. Yeah, I definitely think brave space is a better way to really emphasize what Dr. Sudeep was saying. And in safe space, I just wanted to clarify, I meant like confidential space so that no words get out. But yeah, there's definitely like uncomfortability in the room when we're talking about things like this, right? Like a lot of these participants are coming into Canada and they feel like they might be bombarded with this new information, or they might feel like they're being pressured to really adapt to what positive masculinity means to us, but that's really not the case. It's more of informing them of what's out there and letting them decide for themselves if this is what the path they want to take is. And I love your idea of like a draft words. Like that's amazing. So letting them know that they can say what they want to say, and we might be able to revise it with what the room is comfortable with or what we want to leave it as. So thank you. And Jesus, did you want to share with us an example of how you apply culturally appropriate tools to help engage men and boys?
Okay, I think Jake already says everything.
Okay.
I was thinking about judging. No? And I used to tell to men, you know what? I think I cannot stop judging. I think it's automatic. I think if we're in this group and somebody somebody that looked like homeless, I mean, we are going to judge. I mean, we don't have any options in that. It's my view, no? And I said, but what is important is what are we going to do next? That's going to make the big difference. No? How are we going to respond to that? I need to train myself that give a different response despite my judgment. No? This is one idea. The other idea is that one day we were talking about pronouns, and they asked me, what do you think about pronouns? I think it's important, but I said, imagine that I am sitting in front of my organization, Kiwata inside, and for 5 hours, I see all the people that came in. So they are trans man, trans woman, Black people, a family from Australia, from kids, seniors, all sorts of people in there. And the question is, who deserves more respect and care? No? So everybody deserves the same respect and care. So no matter where they come from, what they say, we need to respect and care about them. And then follow with Jake as well. I think the next step will be curiosity, about how we can start to engage with this person. What kind of things can I say? What kind of support can I give to this person? But for me, the main step is respect and care. And again, that respect and care starts with yourself. Again, going back to ourselves. Now we need to know a bit about ourselves in order to provide those supports to the people that comes to our organization. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. So respect and care for yourself and also others around you to support them. And I just want to ask one last question. What good practices or words of advice can you share with our participants for implementing programs or advocacy campaigns to prevent and end GBV?
Somebody told me the other day that there is a book about, I don't remember the name, it's called Oroto, when a woman talks about parenting. And the title of the book is The Bully, the Bullied, and the Bystander. And I really like that because I think one of the things that we don't want to be bystander. We need to learn as well to stand for the other people when we thought that there is something that is not, I don't have the word now, but something that is unfair, unjustice. I mean, we don't want to be just bystanders. We need to do something about that because that's a way that we can change how things are going to work in our communities. Maybe I say something later, but I just jumped to this idea.
Would anyone like to add any advice they have?
I think this is such a huge issue that providing advice, I'm too small and insignificant to be able to kind of have advice. I would say that, that we're all warriors in this together and never to lose heart because it's been going on for a very long time and your one program is not going to fix it. It's a systemic issue as well. But you are warriors and we are going to learn from you. So the advice is don't lose heart.
Thank you. That's very beautiful. We're all warriors in this fight.
Dr. Mina set me up for failure with this because I do have oversimplified advice. It's just go and befriend an 11-year-old boy, like kind of to what Jesus was saying, like, every angry man, harmful man was once a child who had hopes and dreams and love and all these types of things. And I think when we talk about engaging men in gender-based violence prevention, it's big and scary. And I run youth programs, so there are actual 11-year-old boys to befriend, but within every man that you are working with, there is also an 11-year-old boy. And that was someone who didn't have a friend, who didn't have love, who didn't have support, who didn't have connection, who didn't have a role model. And it's not too late to give him that now. And so if you can do the work thinking of the 11-year-old boy, whether that's in your community, in your program, I think you'll do magical things.
Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
I think it's amazing when you are in a men's group. I mean, when they start in a space that they feel safe. I mean, the way we share those things about our life, it's just shocking to see men talking like that. once I invite a young man to be with me at the group. And then at the end of the group, he said, so men can talk like that? I say, yeah, no? And every time that somebody is coming from out of the group and see men talking like that, they say, they can talk like that? Also, so what we need is a safe space and something that they can help them to start to see themselves from a different perspective. I want to comment just one exercise that I have about anger that it maybe is helpful. I said, I have 6 men sitting here, and I am talking about abortion. I said, no, you know, the rights of the women and this and that, and it's good, whatever. And then I asked these 2 men, so what do you think about what I said? And they said, well, sounds good. I really don't know very well, but that sounds good. Okay, thank you. Then I asked to these other 2 men, so what do you think? Oh, you're right. Women, they have the right to decide over their bodies, and they need more support, and they need more this and that. Okay, thank you. And then I asked to these other 2, and they are so angry about something. And I say, what are you so angry? No, but it's not possible that you talk like that. How do you imagine to say those kind of things? So the question to the participant is to say, so why do you think these 2 guys are angry? And then some of them say, because what you said. I said, if it's because I said what I said, why just 2 are angry, not the 6 of them? Because anger is the angry part is not in me, the angry part is in them. How they perceive, how they see these ideas that I am telling. And I think that's important because when you confront men like that, you say, every time that you get angry, you are not get angry because the other person is saying or doing some things, it's because you see those things in a specific way. You have a specific perspective about that. And that perspective is related to this that we say at the beginning. How do you grow up? What kind of ideas, values, and beliefs you have? But it's not what I said. It's what's your perspective about that? And that for men works very well because they start to see themselves as the source of the anger, not the person in front of them. So that's kind of advice maybe the idea by me saying those things is how to have exercise that they are easy to understand, they are powerful, and that they can change the perspective of the men that we're working with in an easy and profound way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Yeah, so thinking of themselves as a change maker and also being able to change others around them because of that view. And to conclude, I would like to thank Jake, Dr. Sudeep, and Jesus for being with us today. And I'm going to open up the floor to any questions everyone might have. Please feel free to type them in the chat. Or you can also speak out using your mic. I think there might have been a question earlier in the chat about why patriarchy is still acceptable all over the world by Maria Gomez. Maria, if you want to sort of ask it yourself, or if you wanted to ask the full question, feel free to.
Yeah, the question is related to, not so much a question, it's a reality. It happens everywhere. The only places where we don't address this, when it's not accepted, is America and Canada and the States and some European countries. But when you come and you talk to newcomers, when they come and say, oh my God, the first thing you say, I need to apply for child tax benefit. That is for your wife. Oh my God, they get really offended because that's not the role. We all understand that this is what's happened. So the best thing is not to say that this doesn't happen and all over the world. It happens all over. In America, it's different. The way violence is treated, you see the bigger numbers. The domestic violence is happening in Canada and the States. It's incredible. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen and it's not acceptable, or it's acceptable, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, the thing that I was also mentioning is that because there is so much change in the gender roles in America, I'm saying that I see white men don't know what to do with themselves. What is our role? I have seen these discussions in other groups, and they say, well, but And some even questioning the fact that that's what when they go to overseas to marry women that they can oppress, because women from other countries are accepted. The whole minister, the best minister, the king of Japan and all those countries, it's incredible. So that's why women go. If you see how many, it's not that they like variety or they want to be accepted by other countries. The reason behind is because that's how they can oppress other women, and nobody can tell them because they will not speak out. Women in those countries, they don't speak out, they accept how it is. So the question is what to do. Because if you compare white men doing those things and the immigrant men are coming, then they're telling you, why are you asking me to do this if I see this guy doing this? So the morale is not there. Maybe women are talking about that, but men, white men, why white men are not talking about that? There are some groups of men that are producing more machismo than anywhere in America. But other than that, no group, no men of white men are talking about stop violence and doing. We talk within the agencies, but outside, who's doing it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your reflections. Dr. Sudeep, I noticed that you have a response.
Okay, I didn't even realize I was thinking, and one of the things that you if I heard it correctly is that why are white communities or the American and the Canadian communities not talking about GBV as much? Am I right?
Yeah,
Was
but
that-
mostly men, no women. I know women are promoting it.
Mostly, I'm sorry, mostly men?
Men, white men.
Yes, they don't talk about it, right?
No.
Yes. So, okay. So one of the things about any system that is in power or has more control is that it likes to project itself as perfect. So there is also one, I'm going to be a little political. There is one, this whole myth about Western humanity and Western countries, really protecting the human rights around the world. Western, systems and structures are perfect. We take care of our women. Our women are not, there is no violence against them. We take care of everybody. We are the perfect democracies and also the perfect human rights record. But if you see, the biggest oppression or the biggest violators of human rights are Western countries. If not directly, then they are supporting that terror, whether it is Latin America, whether it is Middle East, whether it is even, Eastern European countries. We know what imperialistic military complexes have done. That is precisely what white patriarchal, systems think of, that they have epitomized the perfection of benevolence, of being right, and of also power, contradictorily. So that is why they don't do it. So the more you are at fault, the less you talk about it.
I would just also pick up on a
Thank
word
you.
that Dr. Mina said, benevolence. I think so much of our role as men is told to us to be protectors and providers. And especially in the term male allies, to be an ally means you have more power and privilege than someone else. And so then you're being asked to be a protector and a provider in that sense. But if you're not actually questioning what it is that gives you that power and privilege to be an ally to begin with, and dismantling and deconstructing that, it's just benevolence, right? And it's the same thing on a global scale to what, as kind of a male ally, we do. And I think there are tremendous missed opportunities, especially when we look at political violence in Canada, in the US, to make it about masculinity, about gender, but we don't. And so I think, I think there's a good call to accountability to see more white men engaging in these conversations.
You know, as well, I think that for many it's very convenient not to know many things, no, because I mean, if somebody's preparing the food for us, to do the laundry, to take care of the children, I mean, for men it's very convenient. Why do we want to question that if it's something that we benefit imposing some control over the other people?
Thank you. Yeah, so as Jose put it, men benefit the most from this, and Dr. Sudeep also mentioned that it's because they're targets. And Jake is saying that like we do need to take accountability and we do need to strive to do better. So thank you for all of your insights. And I'm just going to say that if you have any questions, please email them to me and I will email it to the speaker that you would like. And I'll drop my contact in the chat box right now. So this is it for today. Thank you all so much for attending the United Against GBV webinar. And thank you so much for Jake, Dr. Sudeep, and Jose for joining us today. On talking about what GBV means to them, on the challenges of recruitment and retaining participants, and their very creative ways of retaining these participants, and just sharing your experience and wisdom with all of us. Thank you so much for that. And have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.